Is it possible to have too much responsibility, to take too much responsibility for yourself? Like, one thing that I've been thinking is that the victim mindset, where you believe that you have no control over the outcomes in your life. I wonder whether there's an opposite, where you believe that you have an infinite amount of control over them and you lose faith in your innate ability to just carry you through. I've been thinking a lot about releasing the tiller, which is a Jed McKenna quote. He's talking about the fact that the best way to ride a boat through a storm is to actually release the tiller, and it allows the boat to maneuver best through the swells. And I think that a lot of the time, going back to the imposter syndrome thing that we were talking about, as you start to accumulate more and more competence, the higher level of overthinking, the higher level of neuroticism, the more of an attention to detail that got you from 0 to 50 isn't necessarily the thing that's going to get you from 50 to 100. You know, you had to get across a river and it was bad and difficult. You don't need to carry that boat across ground to then get you across the next one. And I wonder whether the opposite of a victim mentality, where you take responsibility for the things that occur in life, I wonder whether you can overshoot that.
You can, for sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, Dostoevsky said that every man was responsible for everything he did and for everything that everyone else does, which is kind of an insane statement, but also somewhat, it's true in a certain sense. You do have an indefinite responsibility, and you do have an indefinite capacity to bear that responsibility, but that doesn't mean it can't be crushing. And then I would say the antidote to that is that you're not in this alone. As your responsibilities mount and your opportunities increase, you have to delegate more and more. There's enough for it's important that you do everything you can, but there's enough for everyone to do. And so you might say, well, the heroic path is one that leads to universal redemption, and that's true. And you might say, well, that's all on you. It's like, it is in a sense, but then the problem that you just described comes up.
Shouldering too much burden.
Well, it can crush you. It can be unsustainable, right? You can torture yourself for not doing it well enough. And it is up to you, but it's not up to you alone. It's not up to you alone. So you delegate and you help build people around you so that they're all working in the same direction. It's an effort multiplier in any case. And you make sure that they get credit. They get credit. Credit's good enough. It's not exactly right. The rewards are in accordance with their efforts, and you can distribute that. You know, because there's also a narcissism that can come along with that, which is, well, it's all up to me. And even if you're working in a very competent manner, it can seem that way, but there's plenty of work to go around, and there's plenty of credit where credit is due. And so what you do as you attain more responsibility and opportunity is you delegate more of that, and you do that continually. I mean, one of the roles of a good manager is to make him or herself irrelevant.
Obsolete, yeah.
Yeah, right. So if you're not a good manager, if your company would collapse if you disappeared, that should all be delegated out. And it's not because you're abdicating responsibility, because also what happens is that if you can routinize something and parse it off to someone else, say, here's a little kingdom for you, and it doesn't have to be little, and it's something that can grow, but here's a kingdom for you, well, then you can go off and do the next thing you need to do, which is extremely important. You know, and you might think there's a kingdom and then it's broken into little kingdoms. And so the farther you are down the hierarchy, the smaller the kingdom you get. But that's only true if you think the world's a zero-sum game, because you could also think of it as a place with an indefinite number of the largest kingdoms possible. And I think, why do we think this is exhaustible in some sense, what we're doing? It doesn't look exhaustible. You know, that's the limits to growth mentality. It's like, economists don't believe in that, because they think, well, no, we can just get more efficient, which we certainly are. We're way more efficient than we once were. And those gains in efficiency, when they're not being interfered with, are increasing at more than an arithmetic rate.